You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is David Smith. He's the senior analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. Welcome to the show, David.
Hello, Jim. It's great to be back. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. I'm just thinking about what's happening in the precious commodities, gold, silver, and, of course, the metals that you often mine alongside of them. Right now, it seems that we're treading water again, not a lot of movement, and people, I think, get itchy feet. They want movement, even if it's going down. They want to see some kind of a direction. But right now, we're not going anywhere. What should people do? Should they hunker down and wait for something to happen, or is there a strategy you can do right now?
When I think of times like this, Jim, it reminds me, having a rich background in history, I'm a lifetime student of history. I used to teach it for many years, but it reminds me when I think of the financial battlefield that we're on now and all the negativity that's out there and the sideways movements and the trends don't seem to be supportive of higher prices for gold and silver and certainly the mining stocks. I think about the Greeks when they had their big issues with the Persian Empire in the 500s BC. And remember after the Battle of Marathon, which they won, which turned out to be a fairly small potatoes in the scheme of things, they consulted the oracle at Delphi, which was when they believed in the Greek gods and goddesses, then it would give them direction as to what they should do at major events. And so the oracle came back and they'd ask him, well, what should we do? The Persians had retreated and gone back to Persia, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And basically the oracle said, you need to withdraw from the fray and build your wooden wall, and the warfare will come again. I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, when the corn is sown or the harvest gathered in, it will bring death to women's sons. And so they thought about this for quite a while, and they had their form of democracy where people would get up and talk back and forth to discuss what the issues were. And they determined that the wooden wall referred to the Greek navy, the Greek sailing fleet of triremes. And so over the next some years, they built these things up and about tripled the size of the navy, and they kind of kept themselves in reserve. And finally, when the Persians invaded in this massive invasion, which some historians think is as many as 1 million men that marched across the Dardanelles and into where the Greeks were living, they had a series of massive battles, the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae and the decisive battle of Salamis, and then another battle the year after, which totally defeated the Persians and basically kept Western culture from being overrun by Persia. And, if they had been engaged all of this time and trying to do every little feint that the Persians set out during those years when they built the fleet, they probably would have expended their psychological and their material resources, and they wouldn't have been as able to take on the threat and the battlefield conditions of the Persians as they were able to do by withdrawing a little bit. And I think there's an important lesson for you and me and all of investors here during the time that we're in.
So just because it seems to be a quiet time, that doesn't mean you should be quiet as well. Look at your top resources, build on those, take a look at what's weak, and that's what they did. They took their time. They didn't jump into it. They didn't chase the retreating army, thinking that, we can put them away this time. And investments, of course, we know there's cycles, and it's all about being in the right place at the right time with the right cycle. And right now, as we're saying, it's just sitting there, but there's no need to panic here.
Well, and there's also no need to be too active. We tend to, and we all have to work on this, we tend to want things to happen, and when they're not, we try to make them happen. We think if we just buy this stock, it'll be the right thing to do. And if we sell that one because it hasn't moved, put more into this, and then before long we've run up a lot of commissions. We put all our cash in. Prices continue to drop. We become demoralized. We don't have any more cash to put in, and it's a vicious cycle. And it's kind of like a grinding up, cycle rather than saying, well, I can't force anything to happen, but I can control myself. I can't control the market. So I'll step back. I'll keep my core positions. I'll keep a little cash in reserve. I'll watch for a stupid cheap price on a stock that I love, and if it does, I'll pick some up, and if it doesn't, that's okay. And then I'll be ready for when it really moves out. I'll be rested psychologically. I'll be ready. I'll have a little extra cash. I'll still have my core position. And when the market finally goes my way, which I believe it will at some point in the reasonably near future, I'll be on board and I'll be okay, and I'll be psychologically ready to handle the next advance in the market.
When we were at the Cambridge Resource Investment Conference in Vancouver a few weeks ago, the buzz on the floor seemed to be pretty positive. But since then, I think because you're there amongst everybody in the industry and you all want everybody to do well, because when one does well, it tends to raise everybody else up. But yet, in that gap between then and now, I'm still hearing companies are having trouble raising funds, even though they have a lot of prospects.
Yes, and the fundamentals have not changed. This is a very, very complicated, challenging environment for resource companies, and the ones that don't have a project that's far enough along or don't have visibility, they're having great difficulty raising money, and some of them are going to blow away. You have to have about $500,000 a year just to keep the doors open, to pay your employees, to file regulatory reports on a quarterly basis and things like this, and to get news out about your company. And some of these companies aren't going to make it. If they've got a good project, they may be taken over by a bigger company or a bigger entity or a fund. But a lot of them are going to, the ones that don't have anything or they just think they do, they're not going to be around. So you really want to be, backing the strongest plays that you can and not overcommitting to any one of them, no matter how strongly you feel that you found the Holy Grail.
So often, too, people, I know we're all looking for the next big thing, and that's where, of course, you get to make a killing. But, the next big thing, where is it? People tend to think, everything here in North America has dried up. You got to go someplace else because they haven't exploited all their resources. And yet you're saying right here in BC, we have some excellent prospects.
We really do. If you look in BC and Yukon, right in our own back door, literally and figuratively, there are a couple of huge gold projects that they're isolated and they're kind of expensive to develop, and they'll take a while. There's a couple of very impressive silver properties, one of which is in production. There's a PGM property which has been stated as perhaps the fifth biggest one potentially outside of Russia and South Africa. And we can just discuss these in general terms because people can easily find out the names of these companies and research them and see if it fits them. But the point is, if you look at things closer to home where the information is easier to get and things like this, and some of them can even be visited physically, it can really make you feel like you kind of have a sense of what's going on rather than feeling that, I have to look at something in Kazakhstan or something in Venezuela or something like that. And so looking in your own backyard can turn up some very interesting gems.
Well, the analysts taking a look at these BC projects said one of the best assets you have, it's in BC. You don't have,
right.
And I know we have, difficulties with idle no more, but I wouldn't call it a difficulty. Again, the developers of these gold properties in northern BC said, apart from getting some top, geological people online, they're working with First Nations. What's best for you? What are your guides telling you? And people who've lived in a place for thousands of years, I'm sure they know, the little telltale places where a rock formation pops up and you can see the kind of strata that's involved, and it gives a great clue of what's going on underneath the ground, and those people would know what's precious and how to work around it if it's an important hunting or fishing area. How can you extract the resource with the least amount of impact on the environment? And if there is any kind of an environment, have a super plan already in place to make sure that after this thing's over, there's no trace of it.
Doing that spade work at the beginning is so important, and if anyone doubted the wisdom of consulting the locals first and foremost while they're developing and exploring the properties, all you have to do is look at Peru, where some massive projects that were literally going to cost billions of dollars are either on the shelf or on indefinite hold because of disagreements with the locals and not going through and trying to be, really make sure that you satisfied all their legitimate concerns. And these things, it's not simple, but it's also not impossible. And when I compare, for example, what's been done with First Nation relations in Yukon and BC, and I look at Peru and to some extent even Mexico. I think you guys have a pretty can be pretty proud of the work, and you meaning the Canadian resource sector industry. I think by and large that operators of exploration and production companies have done a very good job and continue to do so in terms of consulting the locals and getting them involved in what's going on, so that everybody benefits to the largest extent possible.
I mean, I'm thinking right now, if you're planning to open a gold mine in 5 years, how about going to the local high school and telling the kids there, look, there's going to be some great jobs, but you need some substantial training to take advantage of this. We're going to be giving out scholarships, send you down to the BC Institute of Technology or whatever you have to do, some university courses, University of Northern BC. You will be in a position that for the rest of your life, you'll never regret having an education. No one has ever said that. And you'll be in a position to work on your own property, your own homelands, and benefit your family and friends. How about that for a deal?
That's an excellent idea, Jim. And if you can imagine a 16-year-old in high school, he's a junior in high school, and he goes to an assembly and he hears what mining is all about and how, there's a short supply of people in specific positions, and how he could study and get the background coursework and then take specific coursework, possibly even have it financially supported by either the locals in his own First Nation group or by the industry. It would give them a focus and a guidance and a goal, which could be something like you say that could benefit them and their family for the rest of their lives. So it's all about letting people know of possibilities that they might not have understood. And I think going into the schools and having local meetings and things like that, I think is all to the good, because it benefits all stakeholders and it improves transparency.
Yeah, and when you're 16 years old in high school, 10 months is a long time. Trying to tell them to plan 5 years into the future, this is when, your skills and expertise are going to be needed. It's hard to impress on them, but I'm sure if you have, parents on board with this saying, I think that's a good thing for you to do. And plus, even if things dry up in your own particular area, you still have a skill that in Canada will be in great demand.
There's no doubt about it. And think of the difference between getting yourself on the right track at 17 or 18 on a viable professional trail versus knocking around until you're 26 and then coming back and trying to do something. I mean, you've got those lost years. So getting ahead of the curve in terms of your development profile is to be something to be strived for, regardless of your ethnicity.
Yeah, and the biggest mistake Enbridge has made is the lack, when they said, public relations. I said, if you have to put a title on it, you still don't get it. You have to work with people. You're going to be going through their land and territory, and to leave them out of the process until the very last second. I don't know if you're going to build anything, if I'm just going to say build a sand mine, in my neighbor's backyard. Well, I had better talk to those neighbors and be friendly with them before I start digging up sand in their backyard.
And these interpersonal relationships that the company seeks to develop has to come from the heart. It can't be something that's fake and artificial, because you can spot that. And I'll tell you, I've visited a number of companies, some of them multiple times in Mexico. And as you know, about 70% worldwide of the exploration in the resource sector comes from Canadian finance and from Canadian companies. And I am so proud of the companies that I have visited in Mexico, and seeing how they interact with the locals and their work teams and things like this, and the opportunities they provide from them. In fact, I've seen enough that we could probably do a show just discussing how some of these things have been done. And I think it's been a tremendous opportunity which has been handled very, very professionally and authentically by Canadian resource sector entities, and they are profiting from it, and so are their shareholders because of that authenticity.
Wow, 70%. Little old Canada.
Yep.
And I was going to say, with the Canadian dollar, it's slightly less than the U.S. dollar today, but being close at par, I was asking one of the financial people I interview on a regular basis, they're being told that the Canadian banking system is solid, and other investments here compared to other places, pretty risk-free. Well, there's one major government that does believe in Canada, and that's Russia, and they've been buying Canadian dollars for the last 5 years. And there's a country
I think
that depends on resources.
we're going to see this cycle continue, and we're going to see some very exciting prices for these companies who get it right, and hopefully we'll have some of those in our portfolio, having listened to this show and done our own due diligence with some of the information that you and I have discussed here.
Right. As you said, no names, but if you do your homework, which you should anyway if you're going to be investing in the resource sector, you'll spot them and you'll see the things. And as you said, some bargains are sitting there waiting on the shelf, because once they go into production, you know what the price is today is going to be 5 times greater.
You bet.
My guest has been David Smith. He's the senior analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, and you can contact us at info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.